Hey guys, so in the previous video, we introduced the concept of loops in Java, as well as two kinds of them, for loops and while loops. So today we're going to talk about a third one, and that is the do-while loop. The do-while loop is not commonly used just because it's a little weird, but we're still going to quickly cover it. Alright, so here's what the syntax looks like. Put do and then braces, and then while, and the condition. So let's have another counter variable. And let's say while y is less than 10. And then you put a semicolon at the end. And then let's also put like how our condition is going to change. So I'm going to quickly just put my y++. Alright, so basically kind of similar to the while loop and the for loop. As long as this condition is true, it's going to execute whatever code is inside the do block. But what makes it different? Now, what's happening with the while loop here, right, is that it's first checking this condition, and only if it's true it's going to do whatever's inside the block. But with the do while, in its first iteration, right, so the first time it's entering and executing this code, it'll actually execute whatever's inside the do block, because, like, this comes first. And then it'll check the condition, and if it's true, then it'll kind of behave like a while loop, where if the condition is true, then it'll execute it again, and if it's false, then it'll stop. What makes it different is, no matter what, whatever you put in the do block will be executed at least once. So let's say for some reason your condition is dependent on some kind of repetitive task, right? Then in that case, you want that it happens at least once, and then check the condition, and then it'll keep going. So do whiles are used in really specific contexts. And again, as I said before, they're not super common. So why don't we see that in action, right? Let's just print out do while, I don't know. Okay, and let's put a condition in here we know is going to be false. Like, let's say greater than 10. Okay, so we know that this condition is false, right? Because 0 is never greater than 10. So like here, if I put that greater than 10, then it wouldn't even execute. Nothing would happen. But let's see what happens with the do while. So it actually prints out do while once, right? So what's happening is it's entering the do block, and it's seeing, and it executes this once, and then it checks the condition. And since it's false, it'll terminate and just end up at the next line. All right? Cool. So these are the three kinds of loops in Java, and they allow you to do a bunch of cool stuff. Now, let's also quickly go over some of the keywords in Java that are used specifically in the context of loops. And that is continue and break. All right, so first let's talk about continue. I'm going to go back up here to my for loop, and instead of printing sum, let's just print out I. All right, so I'll just get rid of those. Awesome. So let's say I'm printing out all the numbers from 1 to 10, okay? But for whatever reason, let's say the person doesn't like the number 7. So if the number is 7, we don't want to print it out. Right, so we can't really say if I equals 7, don't print, right? That's where the continue keyword comes in. So if I put if I equals 7, and I put continue, and by the way, a quick note, if your if statement has only one line, then you don't need to put the braces. Of course, you could put the braces, but you don't have to. Okay, anyways. So basically what would happen here is it'll check if I is 7. And if that's true, then what continue does is it just moves on to the next iteration, okay? So let's see that in action. I'll comment out this print statement so we can see. So here we're printing all the numbers from 1 to 10, but notice how 7 is not printed. And that's because it just skips whatever is after the continue and moves on to the next iteration. So it's like, when it sees continue, it's like, okay, we'll just move on to the next iteration and ignore whatever's in there. All right? But let's say that if I equals 7, I just want to exit the loop. I just want to terminate it. Okay? Or in a more realistic context, it would be if some condition suddenly becomes true. Like, going back to a video game, if your character suddenly dies, then you just want to terminate everything. That's where break would come in. So if I were to put break here, then notice how when it reaches 7, it just terminates the loop. So the rest of the numbers are not entered. So that's because here it reached 7 and it saw the keyword break. So it just completely exited the loop. Okay? So break exits out of loops, just to keep in mind, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily exit out of any block of code that it's in. It exits out of whatever the most recent loop or the most closest loop it's in, right? Like if I had a loop within a loop and I put a break in my second loop, then it would exit out of that second loop, but it would still keep executing the first loop. And we'll kind of see that more as we talk about loops within loops and all that cool stuff. But that's just a basic breakdown of how the keywords break and continue work. And to be honest, these are also not super commonly used just because it's a little bit sudden and abrupt, so they're used in very specific contexts. But they are important to know if you ever run into a situation where you just want to break or you just want to continue and not execute whatever code's in there. Awesome, so we just went over the do while loop, continue, and break. I'll see you guys in the next video.